Good morning. We have people filling in from the back a little bit, but we're going to get started so we can respect your time today. My name is Christine Connell, and I'm the CEO of Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area. I have to measure my breath on that so I can get it all out in one breath. And we are so grateful for each of you taking time out of your very busy day, and on a day that we were hoping for some snow, or at least some of us were, to join us for this very intentional conversation. So a little bit about our agenda. We're going to have some presentations from you for about the first 45 minutes, an activity with Pastor Michael Wilker, and then at the end of that, we're going to open up the floor for questions with those of us that are speaking. So it's an opportunity for you to try to get some clarity on questions you might have, offer up new information. You may be doing something in your community that we might want to be aware of, and we'll just see how it goes, and we'll try to get you out of here earlier, but at a minimum, we'll end on time at 1 o'clock. Before I bring up Pastor Wilker, I thought that let's start that over. The last week and a half for me has been very traumatizing because as someone whose parents were immigrants, both before the beginning of World War II and after, there was trauma within our family around that transition. And then in the 70s, as a child who grew up in DC, so I'm originally lived here for most of my primary years, left for 35 and came back to lead this amazing agency. My family worked with and hosted a Vietnamese refugee before there was a formal program. And so we all know that at different stages of migration in the United States, there's been trauma and uncomfortableness around people who are different. But I think this takes the cake. And it's upsetting for me as someone who was raised in a family that cared about the neighbor way more than others, that there would be this feeling that we're at risk. And so I am so grateful for each of you and your hearts and your minds in this cause at this time. And I think that together, lots of difference can be made, and we can change the course of our current journey. So with that, I'd like to introduce Pastor Mike Wilker, who's our gracious host in this beautiful sanctuary at Lutheran Church of the Reformation, to get us started.
Welcome to Lutheran Church of the Reformation. I invite you to pray with me. Gracious God, we give you thanks for so much today. We give you thanks for Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area, their leadership and their staff members who have been providing stellar support for our new neighbors in our community for years. We give you thanks for Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services that for over 75 years has been helping Lutherans and other people of faith care for our neighbors and welcome in people who are fleeing from violence and from war. We also give you, though, great thanks for our new neighbors among us, for all the ways that they have blessed us and our communities. We ask that you would continue to inspire us with their courage, with their compassion, and with their joy, and help us be better neighbors for all of them. Amen. Now I'd like to introduce Ryan Mace. He works at the National Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, is part of their advocacy office there, and is going to give us some ideas about what's happening with the court cases and the executive order from President Trump. And so welcome, Ryan, and thanks for your work. A lot of great work this last week.
I've never heard that pronunciation of my name. I like it. Great. It's great to be here. Like you said, I'm Ryan Mace. I'm with the Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. I work here in the D.C. office, but we're based in Baltimore. And I'm joined by my colleague, Kevin, who will be speaking in a little bit. So I want to, first off, thank LSS for inviting us here today and for everyone here's dedication to continuing this life-saving work during such a critical and it really is a crucial time. It's been amazing the past few weeks, even though it's been obviously a really tough time to be doing this work, to see all the commitment that not only my colleagues at LIRS and LSS and our partners across the country and all the work that they're doing amongst this confusion, and as well as all the other 9 resettlement agencies. So for the past 2 days, as just a quick background, we've actually been advocating on the Hill. LIRS is part of Refugee Council USA. There's 23 organizations that are part of it, including the 9 resettlement agencies. So we all came together. I think there was well over 100 people who participated. We went to 150 congressional offices, Republican, Democrat, both sides of the Hill, and it wasn't easy in some of those meetings with Republicans, but that was more important than ever, that they hear our side of the story and make sure that they hear what the impact of this executive order will be. And we really need everyone in this room's help to continue that, because 2 days is not enough. It's just really a start. I also wanted to, before I'm going to talk about what the executive order on January 27th, what it did and what it will mean for the rest of the year, but I just want to say right at the outset, I think it's important to say that LIRS strongly condemned the executive order when it was announced. We actually did a lot of work in partnership with the other agencies to try and stop the order from happening. And that was from the presiding bishop, Bishop Eaton, sending letters to members of the administration before January 27th to encourage them to reconsider the executive order. Obviously, that wasn't successful, but I think that work was important, and you can build off of that. So, and I think just yesterday I saw that the bishop in Jerusalem sent a letter to President Obama. So there's all sorts. Did I say President Obama? Wishful thinking. Yes, President Trump. So at any rate, and I also think it's worth pointing out right at the outset that this complete halt, or I know that we have the Ninth Circuit and we're waiting on that, but it was intended to be, and it will likely, depending on what happens in the court, it was meant to be a complete halt to the refugee resettlement program. And that is unprecedented, a word that I am really getting tired of hearing. So to provide an example of a really more urgent time, after 9/11, the program was suspended for less than 3 months, and that was, all visas were really suspended for a period of time, and obviously the Department of Homeland Security was created at that time. But even then, there was a bipartisan commitment to continuing the refugee resettlement program from President Bush on down. So it really is a different time that we're in when our president clearly doesn't have that same commitment. And since that time, security and vetting procedures for all visa applicants, but especially the biographic and biometric checks that refugees received, has increased significantly, especially for certain groups, including Syrians, who receive far and above what the average refugee, the vetting that an average refugee receives. Syrians really get above that. They're the most vetted of any immigrant group that enters the United States. So to say that we do not have robust vetting, and I said this in Republican meetings yesterday, to say that we do not have robust vetting is quite simply ignoring the facts. If there's any doubt on a refugee's background, they are denied access to the United States by the U.S. government, period. We strongly believe that the United States can and must continue to welcome refugees while continuing to ensure our own security. Our history has proven that you don't need to make a choice, and we should continue to do both. So what does this executive order do? And again, I'm going to talk about what it does, and then I can briefly at the end, I'll just say with the Ninth Circuit what that means. So the program is suspended for 120 days for all populations. Syrian refugees are further singled out from the 120-day pause ban and have an indefinite bar on being resettled until such time that the president determines that sufficient changes have been made to the background and vetting procedures. The Department of State's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration has canceled all travel for Iraqi, Iranian, Syrian, Somali, Sudanese, Yemeni, and Libyan nationalities in the U.S. RAP, with few exceptions. On a case-by-case basis, and when in the national interest, secretaries for the Department of State, Department of Homeland Security may issue visas or other immigration benefits to nationals of countries for which visas and benefits are otherwise blocked. And I think a good example is, I believe it was the Somali 4-year-old who, before the stay was implemented, it took the involvement of Senator Klobuchar and Senator Franken of Michigan to get excuse me, Minnesota, I should know that, to get her here. And I think Senator Klobuchar said on the floor of the Senate, it shouldn't take two senators' involvement to get a 4-year-old to be reunited with her mother here in the United States. That's just unconscionable, and so there are children and their families and refugees, which I believe Mamadou will talk about, that are, during this stay, are coming here. And I think that our partner here is actually sharing quite a load of that burden. But if the ban goes back into effect, it really, that is the kind of people who are being barred entry into the United States. It does not make sense. The program, and I put this in italics, may resume after 120 days from the signing of the executive order on January 27th. But again, with this stay, I think there is a lot of confusion over what does that actually mean. So does May 27th, is that the day? It's really unknown at this point. So I think there's a lot of unknowns. Once the pause is lifted, will the program be the same? The short answer is no. The executive order has placed several guidelines that will shape the purpose and function of the program going forward. So they include that the president has essentially amended the previous presidential determination for refugee admissions for fiscal year 2017, which had allowed, and that was done by President Obama, obviously, that had allowed for up to 110,000 refugees. The current president, President Trump, has lowered that to 50,000 refugees. 50,000, which is a huge, significant cut when we're faced with such needs. So I'm sure, again, I always feel like I said this joke last week when we did this, that I'm preaching to the choir with this group, but because you guys all are committed to this, clearly being here on a Thursday. But there is over 21 million registered refugees. There's over 60 million displaced people. So for the United States to cut our already low, frankly, commitment of 110,000, we actually fought for quite a significant increase beyond that. So to lower it from 110 to 50,000 with such need, it's a devastatingly low number, and it actually it doesn't make sense, and it endangers refugee resettlement around the world, because the other countries look to what the United States is doing to decide what they will do. So it really is, it has long-term impact. So the executive order directs that when the program resumes, the program should prioritize the resettlement of religious-based persecution claims of religious minorities. And one thing that we talked about in meetings the past 2 days is that the president implied, maybe he explicitly said it, that we don't resettle persecuted Christians through the U.S. refugee program. And that is false. That's actually completely false. I don't know the exact number for last fiscal year, but I know it's over, I think it's about 34,000. It's over 30,000 persecuted Christians who were resettled through the U.S. refugee program. To say they do not have access is actually completely false. What we say is we want to resettle persecuted Christians, but we also want to resettle all the other groups that are persecuted as well, because there are, Congolese were the highest population in the refugee program resettled last fiscal year. So there are so many different people who are great in need, who've been in camps for 10, 15 years, over that. So we can't ignore those populations as well. We can do both. So one part of the executive order that also hasn't received much attention is the last section of Section 5. And I'm happy, it's online, but I'm happy to send, I think there's a sign-up sheet if you want any further information, happy to send further details to anyone who wants it. But the last section of Section 5, which directs the Secretary of DHS to examine existing law to determine if the executive order could provide more determinative power to state and local governments resettling refugees. And I think that it's important to note that that's already built into the law. We do, and Mamadou or Christine could talk better about this than I, but we do a quarterly consultation, so 4 times a year. All of our partners across the country, they invite mayors, the governor or his or her staff, senators, state legislators, all local community people to come and to be part of that consultation. And that's just the formal process. There's other parts to that process. So it does happen. It's built into the law, and we think that this is really an effort to there has been a lot of anti-refugee legislation and movements around the country, and we think that that's what this is aimed at. So in light of that provision, it's more important than ever for us to lift up the support of resettlement among our communities, especially working to get state and local policymakers to hear that. And others will talk about advocacy, but I think it's not only, don't ignore your local policymakers. Our congressional members and our president need to hear just as much, but I think people ignore their mayor, their local state senator, or congressional member, or excuse me, House member. And I know every state's different. I'm from Washington State, so I'm thinking of my state. So legal challenges to the EO. So the injunction that was issued blocked immigration officials nationwide from deporting individuals from countries listed in the executive order who have arrived in the United States with valid immigration and non-immigration visas. However, the injunction still allows the government to detain these individuals pending further legal review. It is important to note that this injunction does not impact anyone overseas, and it does not stop the executive order from being implemented. It only holds that individuals referenced in the executive order not be deported upon arrival. So I think that there's been a number of, I wrote that last week, so there's been a number of, so obviously right now we do have refugees who are coming in while this stay is in place. But I think it's important to emphasize that this stay, it could happen today where the Ninth Circuit comes out with their decision, and I think we're all on pins and needles, because truly the decision of those three judges could throw us back to where we were before that stay, meaning that refugees will not be coming in. So it likely could come today or tomorrow. I'm join you in waiting for that decision. So, but I think it's important to note that we are resettling refugees while that stay is happening. And just yesterday I learned about a case. It was a Central American family, and their case was elevated to like immediate need to be resettled because of threats that they were receiving. And the first thing I thought of is, what if this stay wasn't in place? What would happen to that family? And what most likely would have happened is the UN would most likely have had to resettle that family to another country, even though the father is here. So that would mean permanent family separation because of an executive order signed by our president. The father is here, family's still there, immediate threat, because of an executive order, family separation. That's what the impact of him signing that order means. I want to note that this executive order, and this is my last page, the executive order did not include any restrictions on what services we can provide to refugees already here. However, funding for resettlement services is dependent upon Congress, and appropriations have already been allocated through April 28th, 2017, and they were, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but they were allocated at $75,000. So we're already, even though the president had set that number for 110, we were facing a funding shortfall prior to that. So we are arguing certainly that we should be resettling well above 50,000. We think it should be at 110,000. But the point is these are complicated discussions, but the funding needs to be there so we can continue this life-saving work. So if you call your member of Congress, please make that part of your conversation. And we're continuing to do that work here at the national level. I think I'm just going to finish with this. I think it's important to mention here that this executive order really does cause fear in the communities, the families, and all the people that we all serve. Those individuals who've already undergone so much before arriving here. It only increases Islamophobia that has become all too common in our public discourse. I personally think that it is up to each of us to stand with our Muslim brothers and sisters and all those immigrants and refugees who feel isolated and unwelcome in our country by these recent executive orders, and ensure that they know that no matter what piece of paper is signed by who, they are welcome in our country. And many, many Americans, I know all of us in this room, stand in solidarity with them. So I'm happy to be here with you all, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. And like I said, there were some handouts, but I'm happy to send any other information that anyone needs. So I think I am turning it over to Mamadou. So, yes. You can. I think we're going to have questions at the end, but I'm happy to try.
Your business on the Hill.
I think it depends on who you talk to. I think Democrats usually tend to obviously be on the right side of the issue. And I was surprised, frankly, by some of the Republican meetings, and Kevin can speak to this too, he was in different meetings than I, but how I think behind closed doors, staff were much more allied with us than I expected. I think that people do, some people, especially in our public discourse, group it all together. And you know, even our president tweeted that about the Australian refugees coming here and that deal, that they were illegals. Like, he used the word illegals, and that's, first of all, no one's illegal, but second of all, you refugees certainly are not here without a status. We've invited them here, they've gone through 2 years of vetting. So just something as simple as that puts misinformation, especially amongst the public. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that the public has this misinformation, and they pressure their members, especially members who are Republican, and they feel that pressure. So they actually said, you need to give us more information so we can put that out there. I had staff say that, like, somebody asked for something as simple as the difference between what happened in Europe and what happens to a refugee arriving here. She said that would be helpful. So I said, we'll make that for you.
Good morning. My name is Mamadou Sai, and I'm the Executive Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at the Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area. It's a pleasure to be here, and some of you may know me as the director of the Refugee and Immigrant Services program, but what you may not know is before joining LSS and before coming to the United States, I was a refugee. I was a refugee in Senegal for 11 years in a refugee camp. I'm originally from Mauritania. My dad, and just the irony is, right after the signing of the executive order, you all saw the mayhem at the airport and the Customs and Border Protection. My dad was the head of Customs and Border Protection in Mauritania, the southern part of Mauritania. So it was an irony to see today my refugees facing the possibility of not being able to enter the United States, when my dad a few years ago was exactly the head of the Customs and Border Protection in Mauritania. Mauritania is in West Africa. It's a huge country. If you don't know it, it's not a big deal. He was arrested, and they accused him of plotting to overthrow the government, which he did not do. And they put him in jail for a few months. And during his detention, I was very young. I was in middle school. And I went to visit him twice a day on my way to and from school, until such time that I was told that visitations will be stopped, that they will not allow any visitation. And the options that I was given was to either never visit him again or to join him in prison. And I joined him in prison. And there we stayed together for several months. I think we had hours and hours to talk about everything and anything. We were at first 16 individuals that were in that detention center, and every morning they took one, and we never know what happened to them at the end of the day, because we did not know, we did not get any news whether the individual was deported or transferred to a different detention center, or whether they were executed. And we stayed there together for several months until the day that we were approached by the prison ward, and we were told that we will be deported, he and I. So we were put in a huge trailer along with 150 other individuals, driven to the border, and we crossed the border, and we were basically told good luck. And that's how we went to Senegal, and we went to the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and we registered as refugees. And I saw my dad go from being highly respected individuals to lining up for food in less than a month. And we were assigned a refugee camp. We were given those blue plastics that you see on TV a lot, and we were assigned a refugee camp. And that's where we went. A week into being a refugee, I went to the local school and tried to register to go back to school. And I was told that because we did not have any documentation, that we will not be able to register. So it took a few months before I was able to register. And I finished middle school, went to high school, graduated with honor, and I received a scholarship from Albert Einstein Foundation called DAFI in Germany. And I finished my PhD in Egyptology. And by the way, I became the first Mauritanian ever to get a PhD in Egyptology in 182 years of Egyptology history. I lived in Senegal, and with my dad, we kept advocating for refugees. And we were asked to stop or be handed over to the Mauritanian government. And that's when the United States, through the Department of State and the UNHCR, stepped in and gave me the opportunity to be resettled in the United States. I was resettled in Arlington, Virginia, not far from here. And the very next day, I went to a church and was taken to the basement, and I was told, okay, go ahead and grab any clothes that you want. And being a refugee, I think each one of us had 5 bags full of clothing. People were very generous. And we then went to ESL classes. My first language is not English. Actually, English is not even my 6th language. I speak 7, and English was the 7th. So I then went to ESL classes in Arlington Mill Center and learned English, ABC. Then we were helped through one of the resettlement agencies to find employment, and I started substituting at the Arlington Public Schools and then Alexandria Public Schools, then lecturing at George Washington in Chestertown before joining LSS in 2004 when I visited the Baltimore Resettlement Center and saw a lot of refugees that needed help. And I basically asked them, hey, maybe you can use my services. I was a refugee. And so that's how I joined LSS. And today, to be responsible of one of the largest departments at LSS and to be resettling over 1,000 refugees a year and helping those individuals that went through the same processes and the same challenges that I went through is just very humbling. And we were able to do it not because of us, refugees, because of people like you. It's because people opened their hearts, their homes, and because of people's generosity that we were able to rebuild our lives. I was able to apply for my family to join me, and they joined me a couple of years later, and we all became U.S. citizens a few years later, and we're very proud of being U.S. citizens because that was the first citizenship I basically held, because when I was deported, I was very young. I was in middle school and did not have even an ID. So the first ID I have was in Virginia, and so I'm very proud of it. So now you have a better idea why this is very dear to us and to me. We have seen over the past several weeks and months the best of humanity as well as the worst of humanity. And that surge of compassion is not something that should surprise us. We are a nation of immigrants, and we have always welcomed individuals. We have always welcomed the stranger at the gate. And that's what we want to continue to do. I think we all agree that refugees should be vetted. I'm a refugee, and I will say I'm the first one to say, yes, they should be vetted. And they are being vetted. So we think that the extreme vetting is just an extreme way of keeping refugees outside of the United States, and that's not in keeping with our traditions. The refugees, when the executive order was signed on January the 27th, we, and Ryan mentioned this earlier, we saw basically a stop within a few days of many refugees coming through LSS. Because over the past several months also, we were able to work with a lot of congregations through our Good Neighbor program and to match individual refugees with congregations. A lot of those congregations were affected as well, because many of them could not see the refugees arrive, and many of them had prepared, raised funds, and furnished apartments for an individual, and then to just get a phone call from one of my staff that that individual will not be arriving is just heartbreaking. So we, with the hold on the ban now, we have seen a lot of refugees continue to arrive, which is great. We also expect all the refugees that were scheduled to arrive that week, the week of the signing of the executive order, as well as the following week and this week, will be arriving. Priority will be given to all of those individuals that were booked to travel by February the 17th, and that's roughly around 2,000 refugees that will be arriving during that time. And what would happen next, we may not know. For all of our GNP partners, what we suggest is that you continue to work with us and to go through our extreme vetting process to get you ready to be matched with the next refugee that we will have. Now, you also need to keep in mind that the SIV, the Special Immigrant Visa holders from Afghanistan, were not affected by the ban. We and our full church office tend to be a high SIV site. It really represents over 80% of our caseload. We think those individuals will continue to arrive, and we also look at continuing to work with you all to prepare you. As for those of you that want to do the GNP Level 1, which Kirsten will flesh out further. But we have a GNP program, Good Neighbor program, that is set up to serve any congregation, regardless of your size or resources. We will find a way to partner with you to continue to serve, to help those individual refugees that we resettle. And Ryan and both Chris did mention this earlier. On day 121, we may not see refugees. This is like stopping a huge cruiser and just hoping that it will restart within a few seconds. It may take months before we see the next refugees. And even when those refugees' arrival resumes, we will see a completely different program, because it would be a much slimmer program with the proposed ceiling of 50,000 refugees. But we may also see other countries be added to the list of those countries that their citizen cannot travel to the United States or cannot enter the United States. But as long as we have your support, we are absolutely convinced that we will be able to ride this wave and to continue to be a welcoming communities and a welcoming country to all the refugees. Thank you so much. And I will introduce the next speaker, and that's our Outreach and Engagement Coordinator, Kirsten Rossetto.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I will continue to say thank you all the time, because it's very important for you guys to hear how important you are to us. And I think Ryan said it very, very poignantly. We're at a time where there's a lot of separation, there's a lot of disagreements, there's a lot of people who believe one thing or the other, and we're very, very, very polarized in this political climate. But one thing, as phone calls and emails that I've been getting and conversations and people stopping into my office, one thing is very clear, is that we will not be divided, and we will not be separated, and we will not let this deter us from welcoming our neighbor. And trust me, I've gotten a lot of those phone calls, and I've had a lot of those conversations, and that is the blessing that I have, and the privilege that I have with my position, is to work with everyone who is just as passionate about what we are doing and as we are. So we're thankful for you all being here today, not only being here today, but being here yesterday, the months previous, and also the years going forward. With that being said, we are at a crossroads right now, figuring out what the next couple of months, but maybe the next possible years, are going to be like. It does have a lot of questions. We are trying to figure that out still ourselves. We're still in this waiting game just as much as you are. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for standing with us and standing with our refugee families at this time. So the next question really is, what do we do? How do we do it? And when is it going to change, or what's going to be happening? How can we get involved? How can we stand with our refugee families? How can we stand with you, our organization, Lutheran Social Services? Those are questions that hopefully I will semi-answer. I think there's always an open-ended question on what more we can do, but I'm going to try to talk a little bit more about our Good Neighbor program, and also a little bit more ways in which individuals and groups can get involved. Someone just passed around the advocacy flyer, and I will be going over some of that here as well. So just a little bit more about our Good Neighbor program. How many of you, just raise of hands, how many of you have already started working with the family or have been connected with our Refugee and Immigrant Services program already thus far? That's incredible. That's the majority of the room. That's super exciting. And that is not taken for granted. We are really appreciative of all of that. Our Good Neighbor program was revamped about a year ago, year and a half ago, as we were starting to get more and more calls from congregations saying, well, we really want to get involved. How can we get involved? How can we help our families more and more and more? And the question really was for us, how can we capture this? How can we really work and integrate our communities with our refugee families, which we thought was super important. And one thing that we did was create a more comprehensive program that allowed for different levels, for different congregations with different financial needs or what have you. There's a place for you here to help our families. It's broken down into 4 levels, and I'll just explain them a little bit to you now. And if you want more information, you can definitely, my contact information is somewhere. I have my card. You can talk to me afterwards as well. It's also on our website. Our Good Neighbor program is broken down into 4 levels, and I'll start with the level 4 and build up. So really, level 4 is doing an apartment setup. We have communities that are just able to say, you know what, we can do donation drives, we can gather the troops, we can gather all of these supplies, give us a family, give us a time, we'll be there. And that's, we've seen a lot of congregations and a lot of community groups do that over and over and over again, different months, different weeks, even with 2 or 3 weeks notice to also 2 days notice. We've had a huge community support through that program. Level 3 is also a mentoring program for 6 months. And then level 2 and level 1, level 2 really is about that apartment setup and mentoring. So you're really meeting them at the home that they've been resettled in. You are helping them with job development. You are helping them with English conversation, parents and children alike. What's the difference between, helping a child that's learning English and math at the same time, and also an adult trying to get a job and also integrate themselves into the community, public transportation, financial literacy, helping with budgeting. That is all something that is part of our mentoring program. And level 1 is a little bit more intensive. It's a 1-year program that we say, okay, you can help us find housing. A lot of our congregations are outside of the connections that we have in both Northern Virginia and in PG County, Montgomery and PG counties. And so that gives you a way to say, okay, we want our refugee family to really integrate into our communities. And so maybe that does seem to provide an opportunity for you to go to landlords in your area, or maybe they're in your congregations, being able to survey your congregations and saying, what kind of support can we give this family? What housing opportunities do we have already? And are able to work with our regional directors and our offices in both Falls Church and in Maryland, in Hyattsville, to say, okay, we have a place that this family can stay within our community, and we are also going to then help with mentoring and also with rental assistance. There's a rental assistance portion that you're able to support the family throughout that year in different ways. I know that was really short. You can definitely talk to me a little bit more about that. That Good Neighbor program is always changing. It's always something that we're going to need support in. This is a short-term problem, we are hoping. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be fixed in a couple months. After 100 days, everything's going to be fine. It's going to take a little while to figure it out. But one thing that I'm sure of, and thank you so much for being here today, is that we will have communities to help us throughout this time. And our Good Neighbor program, as it is getting involved directly with families, there's a lot right now that we are needing, as we've seen, very, very, very pertinent to the next couple of months, also in helping us advocate for our refugee families and our refugee programs. So on this flyer here that I think was just passed out to you, there's a couple ways that we are asking and helping you kind of think about what the next couple of months might look like. Using your voice. Just to say also, if any of you have visited our website, lssnca.org, there's a Stand with Refugees page. It also goes over some of this as well, so you're more than welcome to visit that page and get some more of these resources as well. Use your voice. Contact your congressman. Learn who around you is needing to be convinced or given more facts over fear that really need to be cultivated in our communities, along with educating others. I think that we all have family elsewhere, not only here in the city, but also in the states. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I have family in Pennsylvania too that I am needing to educate and work with and have conversations with and meet them at a common ground to say, you know what, no, this is my job and this is what happens and this is really what is going on, and I hear you, but it's not necessarily like that. We need to be going back to our communities and educating them, because that is a way in which we are going to collectively become welcoming communities, and that is something that we're not only needing right now in the next couple of months, but in years and years going forward. Also, add your name to petitions and letters. These petitions and these letters will be going to different congresspeople. They'll be going to different organizations that are really going to be pushing our government to make better choices based on facts, based on who we are as a nation, and not necessarily on fear. Also, this is very exciting, create an advocacy team. Our advocacy teams, we are basically creating material that you can download from our website, take back to your communities, and say, okay, we are wanting ourselves to possibly visit our representatives. And so you are able to then use some of those materials with your community to say, all right, this is what we can talk about, these are the facts, and we will be able to provide that for you. So these are just a couple different ways in which we've thought about and how you can be within your communities at this time. This is a huge undertaking, and it's not ever going to be, it takes kind of the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village, it takes a community, it takes 3 whole states, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., or district that is, to really promote this program and really to educate one another and to stand with our refugee families, to stand with our program, and to stand with one another as we are going out into our communities to promote a welcoming society. And we definitely couldn't do our work without you all. So thank you for being here today. If you have any questions, we have more materials in the back. We have a card that you can sign as well. Also, thank you, Mamadou, for telling a little bit more of your story. As you can see, we are all one in this. Whether we come from Pennsylvania or Mauritania or Washington or Minnesota, we are human beings, and we are welcoming, we are made of love, and so thank you so much for being here, and we're very appreciative of moving forward with all of you. With that being said, I would love to introduce Kevin Jacobson. He is also coming from Baltimore with LIRS. Thank you, Kevin.
good afternoon, or morning, whatever it is. I don't wear a watch, haven't worn a watch for quite a few years, actually. I, too, want to say thank you first to Christine and your wonderful staff for last Thursday night and again today, organizing this time, putting us together so where we can reflect and learn from each other. So thank you very much. And thank you, Pastor Wilker, for opening up the space for us to have this time. And to beginning us with a question. Your question was, what are we trying to do with our time and our energies? And as I reflected on that and thought about my hair loss and look around the room and see some graying hairs, I thought, yeah, I think it's time that time gets a little bit shorter, energy gets to be a little bit less. We do need to think about how we are using our time and our energies. Yesterday there was an ad taken out by World Relief in the Washington Post. Maybe some of you saw it. It was a letter to President Trump, signed by in the ad, over 50 of the most highly respected evangelical church leaders across the nation. What I heard was it was actually signed by 150, but they didn't put everyone's name in that ad that had signed it. Our presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton, also had written a letter. Ryan had alluded to it earlier, sent to President Trump. In one of the conversations that we had in one of the senator's offices yesterday, he talked about the importance of ads or signed letters in local community newspapers. These newspapers across the nation are read by politicians, are read by mayors, are read by political leaders. So I ask, how important would it be if the bishop of that synod, where co-signed that letter by Bishop Eaton and put it in the local state newspaper? And he said it would speak volumes. So letters like that are really important. It was emphasized to me again yesterday and this morning as I was coming down on the train from Baltimore, thinking about what we can do. 3 words come to my mind: advocacy, education, and outreach. Advocacy, education, outreach. I'm fortunate in my office as Assistant Director for Outreach in LIRS. I have received numerous requests from across the nation for how can we get our congregation to speak about this issue of welcoming strangers into our country. I received an email or a request from a congregation in California, and I connected them with a former refugee who was trained by a Refugee Leadership Academy, which the LIRS has had over the past several years. The Refugee Leadership Academy has brought former refugees together to do basically 2 things: learn how to tell their story and to advocate on behalf of themselves and other refugees. So across the country, we have trained people to come into the congregations, into the communities, into small group gatherings, to share their stories and to advocate for others, to encourage you. So get in touch with us. If your congregation is at the place of listening to a story, to be engaged, send an email. We will match you up with a former refugee who has gone through the Refugee Leadership Academy to help share their story. One such former refugee, wrote to me this last week: Pastor Jacobson, I also forwarded the request to attend the church in San Jose, California, to other members in my family. I want them to participate in this effort too, as a real testament to the success of LIRS and contribution immigrants to this wonderful country make. We stand together with our refugees around the world. Hung Lee, a former refugee from Southeast Asia. So invite people in. From February 16th, which is coming up soon, to the 26th, across the United States, Congress is on recess. They go back to their districts. The best way to engage in conversation and to talk about some of the issues that have been addressed is to meet congressmen and congresswomen and senators while they are in their district. From February 16th to 26th, they are in the district. We are encouraging teams of people from communities, synagogues, churches, to set times to go and sit down and talk about this executive order and what it has meant to your community. So the next recess won't be until Easter time, which is April 7th to the 24th. So this time in February is crucial to meet with political leaders in their districts and to get, again, materials that are co-signed press releases. Recently, I have lived in the country of Suriname. Actually, I just began working for LIRS in November. I was in Suriname for 8 years, and there was a new word introduced to me. I had heard it from Suriname, but not have ever heard it, or used it, and that's the word tweet. Have you heard that word recently? Tweeting? Tweet? Well, it's really important after listening to the news of the last couple of weeks that I and all of us here learn how to tweet. Tweet, tweet, and more tweeting. Another point, we have in LIRS and other refugee organizations have materials for use in Sunday morning for your worship time. There are prayers online. You can go to lirs.org, Refugee Sunday. That's one word, Refugee Sunday. There are prayers, there are litanies, there are sermon notes, there are assistants in Sunday morning. There are videos that you can show in your congregation to youth groups or women's groups or men's groups or small group Bible studies to help educate people about the plight of refugees in the world. Also, I would highly recommend the website welcomerefugees.org. Welcomerefugees.org. They both, lirs.org and welcomerefugees.org has assistance for those small group gatherings or those worship times to help raise awareness. There's another organization which Pastor Wilker was involved last week, and I hope it will continue, called We Are All America. We Are All America. We Are All America set up last week on Friday a time when people would organize and go to visit at the local mosques across the country. I think it ended up, the effort began about 2 weeks before, maybe even 10 days before. I think there were 34 or 35 mosques visited across the country on Friday during times of prayer by groups of people. Get to know the mosque in your area. Get to know the imams and the other leaders. They feel most threatened at this time. You can hear it on the news. They feel worried about their own communities. Take groups of people and be with them, pray with them, be together and walk together. And there's more information about that on We Are All Welcome. We are all America. Sorry, we are all America. We are all America. Organize potlucks. Who's better at this than Lutherans? I mean, I'm from Wisconsin, and I love a good potluck. But we are really good at it. Organize meal time together in your congregations, in your synagogues, to sit down and have small group gatherings. Recently, an email was sent to me that a congregation in Virginia is starting every other week a Syria Supper Club, where the local Syrian community is invited into the church to have a meal together every other Friday evening. A simple potluck. Enjoy it, be together. There are lots of other opportunities. There are webinars. Have you heard? Who's heard of a webinar? Okay, there are lots of webinars being sponsored out there by different organizations. Go online and you have the opportunity, or contact us at LIRS and we can connect you to webinars where much more deeper conversation is being held. And then lastly, I want to raise up for deeper conversation. There's a book, My Neighbor is Muslim. It's a 7-part study around My Neighbor is Muslim and the Islamic faith here in the United States. It was produced by Lutheran Social Services of Minnesota and LIRS. Oh, and my last word of advice, did I mention the word to you? Tweet.
I would like to open it up for questions from the people that spoke today. And so Autumn, who is our Director of Marketing and Communications, will be our mic girl.
Good morning. 2 questions. First question, is there any movement on settling refugees in the District of Columbia? First question. I have it. Okay.
Apparently I have to use my microphone. Okay, second question.
The second question is there any involvement between what you're doing and the sanctuary congregation undertaking or movement?
Okay, I can answer the first one. I'll be honest, I'm a little unfamiliar with the sanctuary congregations. Okay, so first question. Yes, there is movement around resettling in DC proper. It has been not pursued historically because of the cost of living, and that is similar in other major cities. But LSS has had some very significant conversations with LIRS, and LIRS has been working with PRM and ORR, and we are building a profile now to open up a satellite demonstration project here in the DC area. So we would be the only agency doing that within the city confines. But we have to guarantee them quite a bit of support, but we do have congregations here in the city that on a nice level are frustrated that they want to be one of those good neighbor programs but have to settle a family in Maryland or Virginia. So it's about a 6-month process, and we have the applications in process with permission from PRM. We haven't heard any movement away from that in the wake of everything else that's going on, because I think especially with the level of SIVs that we resettle, we will still have population coming and they want to be in DC. I'm sorry. LIRS, you know, Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services. Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is federal, as is, I'm so sorry, the Population Refugee Migration, which is a unit within the Office of Refugee Resettlement, correct?
No, it's
Department of State. Lots of different federal departments. So you see some of the lawsuits, you have multiple units of the federal government being sued because they're all sort of connected but independent. So I apologize for the inaccuracy. Once you learn them, you get used to using them. So we have had very good conversation about this demonstration project, and so we're very hopeful. It's actually at the top of Mamadou's deck because we have to develop community relationships. And the one positive aspect is where our office is located here in DC proper. 1, we have space, and 2, that whole community is changing in its chemistry, and a very large Muslim community interfaith center just opened in the next block. So we're beginning conversations around all of that for the support. And with the DC government, I've been in conversation with the Department of Human Services, who will help with the job piece of that. So it's been very positive so far. As to the second question about sanctuary congregations,
So they're a little distinct because the sanctuary congregation movement is to help undocumented immigrants who have already been here for many years, if they are hauled in by immigration control, the congregations that are mobilizing to become sanctuary congregations would provide housing within their buildings so that they would not be able to be taken away from their families or from this community. So it's a bit of a different population. But there's a whole variety of ways in between that can be helpful with not just being a sanctuary congregation, but here in Washington, D.C., our government provides support and some legal assistance to undocumented immigrants that are trying to stay here in the country and eventually become legally residing here. But that is also under great pressure from Congress, especially. And so Congress is investigating whether or not the District of Columbia should be able to spend our own tax dollars on supporting those undocumented immigrants here. So that's another area. The Washington Interfaith Network, which our congregation is a part of, is mobilizing an action team around that immigrant, refugee, and Muslim rights issues here in D.C. So if you're interested in that kind of very local D.C. advocacy and responding to this pressure to not care for undocumented immigrants here in the city, that's one avenue that you could go through. Also, one more connection here along this is that some of President Trump's executive orders are directly focused on undocumented immigrants, and some of those are being prevented in our youth from Central America. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in America has a program called Amparo, which is providing welcome to those, I consider them also refugees from a very legal perspective. They're not yet considered refugees, but those are minors coming from Central America. Almost 60,000 of them came last year alone into the United States. And so our congregations are trying to mobilize to make sure that they're being welcomed and protected through the process that they can avail themselves of to be able to stay here and to be reunited with family members that are already here. And one more thing. Are you going to talk about unaccompanied minors? Okay, good.
So the world is constantly in flux. So to add to the Amparo strategy and conversation, I actually met with the director of Lutheran Disaster Response for the ELCA on Monday evening, and we talked about the unaccompanied minors being reunited in their families, and they're looking to develop a congregational structure. And so we forwarded them our model for the Good Neighbor program. So they're actively engaged with us as of Monday in looking at how we can help congregations and various community organizations sponsor those unaccompanied minors and their families through the Central American Minor Program. The other piece of work that we do related to minors is we are also a foster care agency for federal foster care for unaccompanied minors that are coming legally through the resettlement system but don't have parents. So we, through the Office of Refugee Resettlement and the Population Refugee Migration, we receive children that are vetted through LIRS into our care until they reach the age of maturity. We currently have a contract that handles up to 40, we just have a new number, children on an ongoing basis. So those are children that are placed in foster care homes that go through traditional foster care training and then some extra training around the issues related to refugee status and some of the trauma that they've experienced. There hasn't been an order about that yet, so we're not sure what that's going to look like, but we're moving forward. So we're very proud of that program. We are the only coordinator in the region that does unaccompanied minor foster care. So that's a big piece for us.
And you need families.
And we need families,
So
yes.
you want to be a foster care family for a refugee child.
Yes, foster care family for a refugee child. Actually, the director of that unit is here. Jennifer, are you still sitting back there? Just stand up if you want to talk to Jennifer. She's the clinical director for our unaccompanied minors program. I'm sure she can answer your questions. Okay.
Just to follow on, will the decision regarding resettlement within the District of Columbia, will that be a Department of State decision alone, or will there be other entities involved?
So definitely, it would require the approval from the District of Columbia. So we have a coordinator, the refugee coordinator for the District of Columbia, and you have to show that you have enough support from the local communities where we want to resettle. But because also refugees are eligible for domestic programs that are funded through the Office of Health and Human Services, getting the approval from ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, is key in terms of continuing to serve. Because the reception and placement, which is funded through the Department of State, is just the first leg of a long process. So getting both the Department of State as well as the Department of Health and Human Services would be required to be able to continue to serve them.
Okay. Then we have one in the back.
If I could just say one really quick thing about DC resettlement. We, as an organization, have started to gather congregations within the district to start mobilizing ourselves to think about what it will be like to support refugee families here within the district. So thank you, Sig, for asking that question. We are hoping to expand that to all congregations here in the district, whether that means mobilizing our communities to say, you know, what housing opportunities we have, who in our congregations are employers and can employ our refugee families, healthcare, education, and all of the above. So that is, if you are interested and you are a congregation within the district, that is one way you can get involved, and you can talk to me after.
I actually am with All Souls Episcopal Church, and we have affiliated with Christ Church, Georgetown, and St. John's, Georgetown. I don't know if any of my...
We did have people here last week from there, though.
Yeah, I'm the only one here today. And so perhaps this question came up because we're at the point where we're just about to get geared up to start getting our congregations excited. And we're wondering whether we should delay that process, because we know that St. Columbus Church and some others have been all ready, and then nobody came, and then we want to make sure that we get them excited at the right time, which I know is very difficult to decide, but I'd just like your advice. In other words, we're starting to have some congregational events and potlucks and showing films, and then getting the volunteers signed up. And I'm wondering, what's your judgment? Should we wait a couple of months on that?
The short answer is no. There are always going to be things that are fluctuating, always going to be things that might be uncertain. But again, like I said before, one thing that is certain is that we do have communities ready to serve. So we have taken a little bit of a pause in our just getting more more congregations involved and interested and through the process. But you guys have turned in your interest form. You're going to be doing a volunteer training, and that is something that we are encouraging congregations to keep moving, because in this uncertainty, in this will we have families, will we not, there might be a couple families that do come with a significant amount of need, and we do need congregations in that time to be ready to help serve our refugee families. So we are encouraging people that are already in the process to continue, because that is going to be crucial to the next couple of months with families that are still arriving for our organization.
I think the other piece is when we talk about special immigrant visa status, there's this natural inclination to think that that's a body, but they come with families. So there's that pipeline, at least right now, while the Afghani piece is still open, there are families that will continue to migrate. So there is opportunities that are still going to move forward. It just won't be at the numbers should the appeal not work. So, yeah. every day everything changes, and so we're living in the flux of life. So it's
Yeah.
I would say keep moving forward. That
Yeah.
we
And-
should want to have that happen, and maybe that will in those prayers move mountains. And I'm not being crass when I say that.
Yeah. I think also, too, using that excitement, using that compassion in your communities to move forward, whether it be with different, in terms of Washington Interfaith Network, working on sanctuary, working on educating your communities, using that excitement doesn't necessarily need to burn out or will burn out per se. It hopefully will fuel the flame of how your community is wanting to get involved. So definitely use that time to continue to press forward, educating, using different resources, seeing what's around you, whether there's a synagogue or a mosque around your congregations, whether it be continuing those relationships. Definitely use that excitement to move forward, for sure.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of a small Jewish chavurah. It's like a small synagogue, independent. And we have excitement and need in our community is an understatement on this issue. I mean, just very briefly, my father's here. I'm here because my father was able to get out of Nazi Germany, and it was not made easy for him. And many people didn't make it. And in our 110-member unit, we had a meeting last Sabbath. Half of our congregation sat at the meeting. But I've heard a bit about this four-step thing. I need to know, to report to our committee and our group, that practical ways, just literal steps. How do we get in touch with you? How do we do this? Because I've been hearing we should do it, but I don't know how.
So you're currently not a congregation that's actively involved in the Good Neighbor program?
No, we have one informal through one of our members who's working with some. HIAS, which is the Hebrew Immigrant
Yes,
Aid Society, referred us to y'all because
Yep.
they've
Been a
our-
great partner, and in fact,
and we want to be involved with that.
right,
so.
our very first amazing little story, Temple Rodef Shalom out of Falls Church, was referred by HIAS to LSS, and they actually worked with a Syrian family and they got a local mosque involved. So you had all these different cultures together for the sake of this family. It's an amazing story.
They're 100 times bigger than us.
What's that?
They're probably 100 times bigger. They're the biggest synagogue
Hey,
in Virginia.
the-
So,
Goliath was still slayed, right?
correct. No, I just need.
That's Old Testament, right?
Just quite literally, how do we get in touch with you? How do we make this happen?
Kirsten is your point of contact, so I would encourage you to make sure you don't leave without that information today. And thank you for being here
Thank
and
you.
for having that mission in your congregation.
Thank you.
Power needs to speak to power in an organized, bullying way sometimes. What vehicle is available for cross-denominational collaboration and voice that could be used over and over again the way, Luther used the printing press to get it out there and just to kind of really show some muscle? On the practical side, implementing, we'll all have to figure out these solutions on a community-by-community basis. But it seems to me like our voice is going to have to show up over and over again, not once or twice a year with our member who may already be sympathetic, but in the louder, roaring way in the halls of Congress. So how do we get these churches? Because if there's ever been unifying challenges, these are unifying challenges.
Mm-hmm. Do one of you want to respond to that?
Sorry. Why do I get the hardest question? I think in terms of, so your question is how to not only faith communities, but all of us work together and build on the momentum. I mean, I think first of all, it was great to see, I haven't been doing this as long as my colleagues, but working on refugee issues has felt a little lonely for a time, and then all of a sudden to see that support in the streets all across the country at airports has been great. And I agree. I think that you can't just protest when there's something to protest. You have to keep doing it in many different ways. And the one thing I want to say is, so I'm originally from Washington State, but now I'm a Washingtonian here. And, we were talking about DC and the need to, and Congress has a role in that. And I'd say, as someone who is now a DC resident, and we do not have a voting member of Congress, you can call every member of Congress and tell them that first of all, that you think that refugee resettlement should happen here. I mean, I think that we all have that right. And so feel free to do that. In terms of how we work together, so like I alluded to when I spoke, all the resettlement agencies are part of Refugee Council USA, and we're constant, and there's coalitions that are built beyond that. There's the Interfaith Immigration Coalition, which LIRS is a participant in, HIAS is a participant in, and they have regular meetings. In fact, I think there's one today. That's where Kevin's going. And I'm part of the Syrian Refugee Coordination Group. There's a 4 o'clock call. I mean, there's just all these different ways. And I think when it comes to involvement of the community, I think that, so tweeting is certainly one way, Facebook, creating an event. I mean, I think it's hard to underscore how important it is. We do it through our organizational involvement, but I think that there's power in one congregation meeting and doing a potluck or doing something and inviting others and then building off of that. And if that's as little as just doing a demonstration outside of the White House or outside of Congress, going to the mayor's office to show that support, I mean, whatever it looks like, I think there's no act that's too small that, I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but
I think last week, say it again?
I think there's a divide between all of us advocating every moment of every day through prayer, word, educating, talking to friends on. But then there's this more formal thing where there's 250 churches listed on an ad in the Washington Post that says, we support these basic principles. Because that really does turn up the heat, in a political sense.
So I know that as an agency that is a subcontractor to the government, we have limitations on how we advocate because we would be out of compliance with our contract. But what we can do, and Autumn has worked really hard on that, is to have on our website references to opportunities for situations like that, where you could get more involved, you could see things that are going on, and you can choose how your congregation wants to participate in that. In addition, the congregational community group that Pastor Wilker's congregation is a part of is doing large-scale stuff. Last Friday was an intentional prayer at local mosques, and I know that went on in New York City as well. So we can get you information where larger voices can be heard from a congregational perspective in Mass. We can't tell you which ones you should or shouldn't do and which ones are better because that puts us a bit at odds with our contracts. But we certainly can make sure information is readily available where your congregation could choose to participate on a much larger scale.
I'm Cindy from St. Columba's Episcopal Church. I have a question for Ryan, who mentioned that there were efforts before January 27th to stop or change that executive order. I've read that there is a draft executive order now cutting off all current social services to immigrants and refugees already in the United States. Are efforts being made to change or eliminate that?
Yes, the national, I hate acronyms too. There was actually a big call that one of the NILC, I'm forgetting what it stands for, but they did a call and there was so much interest. I think they had like over 500 people. They thought there was going to be like 20 people on the call, and they sent it out, and everyone sent it out to everyone else because they've already done a whole backgrounder on the public benefits executive order that's been circulating around, and that happened because Vox actually, the site Vox got a hold of these executive orders, and they didn't release the text of them until the president, when he did issue executive orders, the language completely matched the executive orders they had got a hold of, so then they released all the rest because they figured that they actually were reliable sources that they've gotten this from. And so yes, there is one that would cut off public benefits for certain groups. Refugees, from my knowledge, who are already here would not have been, that immediate 3-month services that they get wouldn't have been impacted? Maybe I'm
My
wrong.
understanding is it would impact refugees who are here that are accessing federal benefits. So it would include those that are recently here.
Past a certain, yes, for like that 5-year, beyond
Yeah.
those. But the point is, first of all, it hasn't been signed, and just the fact that it's being circulated and considered is horrible. So I would say that ACLU knows about that. I mean, everybody knows about this, and I think that they're getting pressure from different ways, and I think that it's something that a lot of people are tuned into. But I mean, some of the things that they're considering are truly horrible. I mean, that's just one of them.
There's an organization, the Migration Policy Institute. You can subscribe to their listserv, and when an executive order or any important piece of legislation hits some level of distribution internally, they usually publish it. So it's an easy way to just get drafted into your inbox, stuff that's floating around. And I find that works really well.
Hi, I just had 2 quick things. One is a comment, one is a question. The comment is that if anybody knows families that are coming through in the next few days before maybe something changes, there's a new organization and they put up an app and it's called airportlawyer.org. And it's serious, and what you do is you sign up before you're leaving, and then if you get stuck in an airport, they know you've been coming. And if you go and look at on the web, all the information is there, all the different agencies that are sponsoring it. It's volunteer pro bono lawyers around the country. And then the question I had was, do you know what happened to the Afghan families around here that were blocked at the airport, apparently not allowed to come in, even though I realize Afghanistan is not on the list of the 7 countries, but the Post has been writing about a couple of families, one in particular in Columbia, Maryland.
I was in Columbia, Maryland last week on Wednesday with the communities, the congregations that are sponsoring. So I'm on their email listserv. And yesterday and the day before, I saw hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah from about 3 or 4 different people on the listserv. But I don't know if that means they arrived or they are coming. All I know is they're really rejoicing in Columbia, Maryland at this time.
I don't think that family is an Afghan family. I thought it was a Syrian family.
They're an Afghan family. Yeah, they're an Afghan family that was settled. They're an Afghan family that was in a camp in Malaysia for the last 3.5 years. They had applied for 2 different kinds of visas. One was refugee status, and the other one was this SIV visa, which stands for, I've forgotten. They received the first type of visa first, refugee status. So they quit applying for the other one. And so when the executive order came down, they no longer were allowed to come into the United States because they didn't have the SIV visa. All right, so they had a refugee status visa. Now, why that particular family was blocked because they were from Afghanistan, I'm not sure.
I think part of that is just when the order came out, there was no process and structure, and people are getting caught up because people in those places that are in positions of authority aren't necessarily sure how to implement clearly.
Well, and because when the order was in effect, all refugees were...
Yeah, everyone understood it to be everyone.
Any country.
Yeah. Right.
My question is, our congregation has been approved. We're on the list. We're waiting for a refugee family. And I heard somebody mention that there's volunteer training available. I think our congregation wants to have some momentum going. And you talk about potlucks for refugee families. What we need, I think, is to connect with other congregations who have refugee families so that we know who we should invite. I mean, we just feel as if we're
in this desert, we don't know where the people are who are struggling, and we need connection, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer that. So in terms of the volunteer training that I was talking about, it does, every Good Neighbor program, congregation that's going through the program gets a volunteer training, and I do believe River Road has gone through that, correct? They've already had a training. So, I mean, we have materials and different things available for the people who are possibly newer to the team, so we can reach out to you for sure, or I could give that to your general coordinator. And so that's available and is a requirement for congregations who are going through the process. That doesn't mean necessarily that that specific group is the only one going through the process. So it's really great to hear that your congregation is, and this group is growing, so we can get you those materials for sure. Just in terms of what else to do, we are creating a Good Neighbor program Facebook page. That Good Neighbor program, individuals can go and kind of use that as a board to say, what are you guys doing, or what is your family needing, or we're going through a different part of the process, how can we help you? I am sending out the link today. My apologies, it's been quite busy. So we are definitely creating those resources to have congregations be able to talk amongst each other a little bit more and build those communities. Mm-hmm.
The Facebook page that she was referencing is a closed group. So if you have to be in the process or applied or currently supporting a family, and Kirsten is managing it, so she'll know whether to accept you or not. Just know that you can only get in it by going and clicking.
And that's for safety reasons for the conversation, not because we want to be excluding people.
Hi, I also have a comment and a question. My comment is a little piece of encouragement. I did manage to arrange a meeting this morning before I came over here with my Congressman Elijah Cummings, legislative staffer in charge of immigration and refugee issues, and we had a very nice conversation. She shared with me that Elijah Cummings feels that the religious community is very, very key in changing hearts and minds and moving things forward. So she was very encouraging in that way. And she also emphasized the local efforts that we're doing, things like potlucks. I'm thinking of Nosh with your neighbor. So we have, Elijah Cummings is a pretty reliable ally for us, but I thought it was nice to hear that he thinks and his staff thinks that doing what we're doing here is actually a very powerful way, because a large number of Americans consider themselves Christian or religious, and this is a commonality that we can grow from. So that's my encouraging comment. My question is about the airport situations. Does LSS or LIRS have the ability or power to find out what's still going on? Because my impression is there are a lot of questions about who may still be getting held, who was held, what the heck actually happened, and how can we shine a light on that?
To your comment, I would encourage you, if you do an activity like a potluck or an outreach, invite your congresspeople to participate. The congressperson that I spoke with when I was with the team on Tuesday, I invited them to come spend a day in our refugee office, and they were actually surprised that I offered the invitation. So I am going to follow up and invite the staff person to come and spend some time with one of our case managers and a family so they can see on the street what that looks like in an operational standpoint.
Okay. With regard to what happened at the airport, I can speak for our refugees. We have noticed huge delays in terms of the processing at the Customs and Border Protection. We had clients that were held for 6 hours before they complete the process, but none of them were retained. Now, there are some huge firewalls between the refugees' arrivals, so I would not be able to know whether the refugee arrival for the IRC or the ECDC or the agency made it or not. But for LSS, every single individual that we had scheduled, and we had around 45 individuals that were to travel between the 27th and the 2nd of February, all of them made it, yes. So everybody was reunited with their families. Yes, some huge delays, a lot of questionings, a lot of secondary screenings, but all of them were able to be reunited with their loved ones.
I'd like to make a follow-up comment, not on that, but on what Christine just said. I was talking with someone before the gathering here. So often acronyms get mixed together: Lutheran World Relief, Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service, LSS. Our office is in Baltimore. We know that many congregations are torn over this issue, half on one side, half on the other side. I encourage you to take an opportunity to invite people to come to Baltimore and tour our office. It's really helpful just to see the office, to hear the stories. We're open, the doors are open. We give tours regularly. So put together a team of people and come to Baltimore. Take in a restaurant at the harbor, go to the Orioles. If you like the Orioles game, we're right next door, and visit us. You're welcome. Just contact me. We can set up a tour. You can learn a lot about the organization and what we do, as well as Lutheran World Relief at the same time.
I had a question. My congregation was going to send people to the volunteer training in Virginia in January. That was canceled, and then to Maryland in February, but that was canceled because of events. Is there a way for a congregation that has not yet had the volunteer training to get started in the helping refugees to begin that process now?
Yes, the answer is yes. Unfortunately, it's been a little bit of a hard time adjusting and figuring out what we're going to do. We did take a little bit of a pause so our agency, our program could be as organized and as educated on what's going to happen further for our agency and also for the congregations getting involved to come, because we not only want this to benefit our families, but we also want this to be a good program for all of you that isn't too strenuous or isn't too confusing. So we took some time, yes, to kind of regroup ourselves after what was going on, but we are continuing our orientations in March, April, and going forward the next, I think, 7 months I have scheduled. So they will be moving forward. We will have orientations, the Good Neighbor orientations. Once a month, they happen and alternate between our Falls Church and our Maryland office. They are on our events calendar on our website. You can also get in touch with me. One thing to note, if you are wanting to come to that event, it is public for sure, but make sure that you RSVP to me, because if I don't have you as an RSVP, if we do have to cancel, if we do have updates, if something does happen, I don't have your contact information to let you know that something has changed. And we want this to be as transparent as possible. So please let me know how many people you are coming. Normally we say that this orientation is for a few key people that are going to move forward and be general coordinators. So you don't have to have 8 or 10 people coming. You can have 2 or 3 of you who are really wanting to dig deep and organize your community. But please, please RSVP to me so I can get you the best information before and after the orientation. But they will be continuing. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, hi. I'm just so curious, how many refugee families have been adopted by congregations now in the DC metro area?
Well, I can only talk for our organization, Lutheran Social Services, NCA, and this is totally going off top of my head, which has been very unorganized lately. But I do know that we have over 30 congregations who are within the process, and our list of people who have inquired about the Good Neighbor program is hitting 100. So we have a good amount of people who are not only have a family, are waiting for a family, are starting to get involved, and are interested. So hopefully we'll be able to really cultivate those in the next couple of months and year going forward too. But that's kind of the number right now.
And Kirsten manages most of that by herself. So again, we need some admin volunteers who would like to be sergeant at arms in the communities to help with that, because we want everyone to have that opportunity to the fullest extent that they're able.
Is sponsorship public information? Or could it be a list on your website of congregations that are currently sponsoring families? It seems like that would be very useful to us as sponsoring families, and especially in Baltimore, to know of other families that are there. And it would be hugely useful if all the organizations were to do that, and we could know that World Relief or International Refugee Committee was anyhow just down the road from us.
I think that is a really great idea. One reason why we haven't necessarily put public information out is because a lot of congregations haven't necessarily said that they're wanting their information to be public. That is something that we didn't quite think about as we were moving forward pretty quickly to organize our congregations. So that is something that I'm trying to work on, connecting more individually congregations, especially the ones in Baltimore and in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. One thing that we are starting is the Facebook page. Hopefully I will get people's information and possibly start a listserv or making things more public, but also with people and understanding that depending on the congregation and individual, they might not necessarily want that public yet, but we're starting to work with new congregations, and that is a need that we are hearing, so we're trying to answer that quickly.
So if I can add a response, and then I think we're going to have to close so we can end on time. As she moves forward with that, each congregation, we can have that conversation for them to choose to be public, because we have had a few congregations that have had some backlash. And so we need to be able to protect them and let them choose how public they want to be. But with our two LARS staff sitting here, the question about all of the resettlement agencies in this region being able to be public about that, I don't know how the other agencies handle their matching. LARS, is huge in its family adoption through congregations. I don't know if other resettlement agencies do the work the way that we do, but that's part of what makes us the second largest in the country, is that connection within the congregations. But we'll certainly make sure that we hold Kevin and Ryan to task to find that out for us. And as we can put information on the website about congregations, we will do so. But we do want to make sure that we're protecting them at the same time, because it is a risk that you take in a challenging political environment to put your church information out there.
Absolutely.
The first sponsorship we did in 1976, it has always been a group within the congregation. We just never wished to subject it to a vote. So I don't know if there were a phrasing of that. And in reality, each time, the whole, especially by the time there's a face, the whole congregation is aboard.
Well, we have a congregation here that works with us that back in the 70s resettled over 30 Vietnamese families. So, there's a long history of that within the organization, and it sort of ebbs and flows as the tide does. So we'll take all of that into consideration and see what we can do with that.
Yeah. I just want to point out, too, I am definitely not alone in this effort. I'm going to have Mira and Kianush, if you could stand up in the back. I know that you're here. These are my wonderful team members. Mira is the Community Resource Coordinator in Maryland, and Kianush is the Community Resource Coordinator in Falls Church. All of you are working with, or will be working with, both of them. They definitely keep the wheels turning, so thank you. And if you have questions in the end, you can come to me, or you can also come to them if you've already connected with them further. So,
okay.
That's it. In terms of mentoring families, so all of our families have the choice to be mentored or to not be. So we have congregations who are helping families that we've identified that need significant help pre-arrival. And also there are families that do say and do, it is something that they have to say that they want throughout the first 6 months and possibly further on, that we're able to connect them with individual mentors. We do have an individual mentor program. So depending on the family, depending on the need, depending on the support they already have, either with a U.S. tie, that's someone that they already know here, or that they're needing help with certain things, we figure that out with them. They do meet with a staff member, come up with certain goals, and we do get them that support, whether it be with a congregation or with individuals. So thank you, Cindy.
So if a congregation or an individual wants to volunteer in the mentor program, do they contact you, Kirsten?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
I will just say, again, I mean, our interest is really exceeding a lot of current need that we have. We're trying to evaluate how many families are in need of help. I talk to 20 plus people a week, most of them wanting to be in that program. So we are trying to make sure that all of our individuals are being matched, and also all the families that are wanting and desiring support are being matched. We're trying to see and evaluate the difference, if there is, and if we do need more mentors. We are working really hard, and thank you for your patience as we're moving forward.
And one final distinction for this comment. So LSS of the National Capital Area handles Northern Virginia, the DC metropolitan area, and then Maryland, and Baltimore County, but not Baltimore City. So when you're talking to your friends and families, if they're a congregation in Baltimore City, that is not a jurisdiction for us. But any of the churches and community organizations in the county, that's just how it is set up right now. So if you have friends in the city or outside of our area, just like Highest referred temples to us because it's not their area, we will refer those groups to the organization that is serving in their community. We're all in this together, so we're totally transparent about all of that. And with that, I will turn it back over to Pastor Mike to close us out.
Thanks. Just two last things. One is to remember, if you don't know, that Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area last year resettled over 1,000 refugees within our region. And so there are thousands over the years that have been supported by Lutheran Social Services. And so we've got lots of people to reach out to and to welcome. The second thing that I wanted to underscore is about the advocacy that some of you are interested in. Definitely Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. You can go LIRS Advocacy on Google or any search engine and find them and sign up for their email listserv. And they are very wise in targeting the power that we need to bring to this situation. So LIRS, working with the other immigrant and refugee rights organizations, are targeting, for example, 10 specific states in this next year. And so they're going to try to change the tide, and they're going to need all of your support and your family and friends in those 10 states to help tell the stories and to invite people in to this process. So LIRS is one of them. Also check out your own denominational advocacy resources, the ELCA, the Missouri Synod. They all have ways that you can channel in through those directions too. So now I'd like to read the prayer that's on the Lutheran Social Services website, Prayer for Refugees. God, you leave no one behind, no one alone, and no one to dwell in darkness or fear. You led your people out of Egypt to safety and a promised land. You protected Joseph, Mary, and the baby Jesus as they traveled in hiding from the murderous Herod. This day, walk with all refugees fleeing for their lives, with those who wait in tents and open fields, clinging to a small hope to rejoin family and rebuild their lives. And for all refugees who now dwell in darkness as our nation has tried to close its doors to them. Our hearts are broken. Refugees who would be our new neighbors are being forced to stay in harm's way and away from the loving embrace we are ready to offer as a new family in a new land. But fear will not overcome us. You are our light. We pray for justice. We pray for compassion. We pray for all who govern, that they may be blessed with wisdom and courage to reflect your love in a broken world. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen. Thank you, everyone, and check in with each other on your way out.